How would you feel if your own boyfriend and your mother were secret lovers right under your nose? Would you fight for him, or would you let them be together? My name is Ella and this is my story. I'm a 19-year-old whose first love chose her 39-year-old mother over her. What would you do in my place? Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it, because this one will leave you speechless. If you've ever been in love for the first time, you know what I mean when I say everything feels magical. Every text feels like a love letter. Every phone call feels like a movie scene. That was me with Edward. He was 25, tall, confident, charming without trying too hard. The kind of man who'd open doors without making a show of it. Who'd remember the exact way I took my coffee. Who'd walk me home even when it was out of his way. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He was my whole world. We met at a bookstore of all places. I was clutching an old copy of Wuthering Heights, and he made some corny joke about tragic love stories. We talked for hours that first day, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is how it's supposed to feel. He was different from the boys my age, more focused, more grounded. My friends envied me, and honestly, I envied myself. I thought I had found the man I'd grow old with. Life was simple, until I decided to bring Edward home to meet my mother. Now, you have to understand something about Mom. She's 39, but people often mistake her for my older sister. She has this warm, radiant energy that fills any room she walks into. Ever since my dad left us years ago, she poured herself into work, never really dating, never really laughing the way she used to. I always wished she'd find someone to make her happy again. Someone who'd remind her she was still young, still beautiful, still alive. When I introduced her to Edward, it felt natural. I was proud of him. Proud of her. We were sitting in the living room, eating takeout, and Edward was his usual polite, charming self, complimenting her cooking, even though the food came from a paper bag, making her laugh in that shy, surprised way I hadn't heard in years. I didn't think anything of it at first. Why would I? They were just getting along. In fact, I was happy about it. Who wouldn't want their boyfriend and mom to like each other? But there was this one moment, so small I almost ignored it, when I caught Edward looking at her just a second too long. Not in a disrespectful way, not in an obvious way, just long enough for me to notice. I brushed it off immediately. He loves me, I told myself. Stop being paranoid. Later that night, as I lay in bed replaying the evening, I tried to laugh at myself. Jealous of my own mother. Ridiculous. She was nearly 40. He was 25. I was 19. Why would I even think such a thing? But something about the way he smiled at her stayed in my mind. Over the next few weeks, Edward came over more often. Sometimes to see me. Sometimes just to help Mom out with little things around the house. Carrying groceries, fixing a leaky faucet, changing light bulbs. He said it was because he wanted to make a good impression, because he wanted my family to like him, and I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Mom seemed to enjoy his company too. She'd talk about how polite he was, how rare it was to meet a young man with such manners these days. She'd tease me about how lucky I was, and I'd laugh along. Deep down, I was proud that she approved of him. It meant a lot to me. Still, there were little things I started to notice. The way he'd compliment her cooking twice in one conversation. The way she'd blush ever so slightly when he praised her dress. The way they'd share jokes I didn't understand. Laughing while I stared, wondering what was so funny. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found them standing close, whispering about something. When they saw me, they both went quiet. Mom smiled nervously, Edward kissed my cheek, and I pretended not to notice. I didn't want to seem insecure or jealous. That wasn't me. That wasn't us. But lying in bed at night, I couldn't shake the feeling. Something was off. I just didn't know what, and so I ignored it. I told myself I was imagining things, that Edward was just a kind, thoughtful man and my mom was just grateful for the attention. After so many lonely years, I convinced myself that the unease in my stomach was just silly insecurity. Little did I know, that unease was the first sign of my entire world about to fall apart. I used to think I knew Edward better than anyone. I could tell when he was upset just by the way he'd run his fingers through his hair. I could tell when he was lying by the tiny pause before he answered. So when I started noticing little things that didn't add up, I told myself I was just being paranoid. It started small. Edward would come over even when I wasn't around. I'd be at class or out with friends, and he'd text me later saying he'd stopped by to help Mom with something. The sink was leaking, he said once. Your mom needed someone to carry the heavy groceries, he said another time. He always had a reason, and they always sounded so reasonable. Mom would casually mention how helpful Edward had been that day. She'd smile as she told me how polite he was, how well he carried himself, how rare it was to meet a young man like that these days. She never said anything inappropriate, and I never imagined she'd cross that line. After all, she was my mother. But the more I looked, the more I noticed. Whenever we were together, Edward seemed distracted. He'd glance at his phone more than usual. He'd smile at messages he didn't explain. If I asked who it was, he'd just say, work stuff, or just a friend. I believed him. I had no reason not to. And then there was Mom. She started dressing a little nicer around the house, light makeup, her hair brushed in the mornings, wearing dresses instead of old t-shirts. When I teased her about it, she just laughed and said, a woman should look good for herself, even at home. I didn't think much of it then. One Saturday afternoon, Edward and I were supposed to go out for lunch. When I arrived home to pick him up, I found him in the living room with Mom, both of them laughing over something on her phone. When I walked in, they went silent. What's so funny? I asked. Just a meme your mom showed me, Edward said quickly, pocketing his phone. Mom smiled, but it looked awkward. I told myself it was nothing. They were just getting along. Isn't that what I wanted? For the man I loved to like my family? For my mom to feel included? I hated myself for even thinking something could be wrong. But it kept happening. They developed these inside jokes I didn't understand. They'd talk about music I'd never heard of, movies I hadn't seen. When we all had dinner together, they'd sometimes end up sitting closer to each other than to me. It wasn't blatant. It wasn't obvious. But it was enough to make me feel like an outsider in my own relationship. I remember one night, we were all watching a movie on the couch. Edward sat between us. At some point, I looked over and saw Mom smiling at him, this soft, almost shy smile I hadn't seen on her face since before Dad left. And Edward, he smiled back, like he was looking at someone he adored. My chest tightened, but I told myself I was being ridiculous. Stop it, Ella, I whispered to myself that night in bed. You're just overthinking. He loves you. She's your mom. Nothing's going on. But deep down, something felt wrong. I just couldn't prove it. The strangest part was that Edward still treated me like I was his everything. He brought me flowers, sent me good morning texts, kissed me like nothing was different. If anything, he was more affectionate, almost as if he was trying to convince me nothing had changed. And I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. One evening, after dinner, I caught them in the kitchen whispering again. When I walked in, they both looked startled. What are you two plotting? I joked, trying to mask my unease. Nothing, Mom said quickly, glancing at Edward. Just talking about recipes. Yeah, Edward added, forcing a laugh. Your mom's teaching me how to cook better so I can impress you. I smiled and nodded, but my stomach was in knots. Later that night, I stared at the ceiling in the dark, my mind racing. Was I imagining things? Was I being jealous over nothing? I hated myself for even thinking badly about my own mother. She raised me. She sacrificed everything for me. And Edward, he'd never betray me, would he? I convinced myself it was all in my head. I told myself they were just being friendly, that I should be grateful Edward was kind enough to care about my family. I forced myself to ignore every little red flag, every uneasy feeling that bubbled up inside me. But I didn't know then that the truth was already unfolding behind my back. The bond between them wasn't just friendship, and soon I was going to find out the hard way. I'll never forget the night everything came crashing down. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, almost too quiet, like the world itself was holding its breath just to watch me break. It was a Tuesday. Mom had cooked dinner, spaghetti, Edward's favorite, and we'd eaten together like any normal family. They'd laughed a little too much at each other's jokes, and I tried to pretend I didn't notice. Afterward, Mom went upstairs to shower while I stayed behind to clean up. Edward said he was heading home early because he had work in the morning. He kissed me goodnight in the doorway, the same way he always did. I watched him drive away, telling myself to stop overthinking. Then Mom's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Normally, I wouldn't even glance at it. It wasn't my business. But something made me look this time, maybe intuition. Maybe that gnawing pit in my stomach that hadn't gone away for weeks. I saw Edward's name on the screen. My heart skipped a beat. It was probably innocent, I told myself. He could be thanking her for dinner or asking about a recipe. That's all. Just normal, friendly stuff. But then another message lit up the screen before I could look away. Can't stop thinking about you. The air left my lungs. My hands started shaking. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. I swiped the phone open. Mom never locked it and scrolled. The thread was full of messages. Not one or two, dozens. Edward telling her how beautiful she was. Telling her how he'd never met someone so mature, so understanding. Mom telling him she didn't want to hurt me. Him replying that he couldn't help how he felt. Then I saw it, the message that shattered my heart completely. You're amazing. I wish Ella didn't have to get hurt. But I can't pretend anymore. My knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of the counter just to stay standing. My vision blurred with tears as I read on. They'd been talking late at night when I was asleep. They'd been meeting during the day when I thought Edward was at work. She'd called him my Edward. He'd told her he wanted to be with her, not me. I dropped the phone like it burned my hand. I stumbled to my room, slammed the door, and collapsed onto the floor, shaking uncontrollably. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest and stomped on. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My own mother, my first love, together. I lay there all night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every smile, every laugh, every whisper I'd brushed off. How could I have been so blind? How could they do this to me? The next day, I didn't leave my bed. I ignored Edward's calls. I ignored Mom's voice at my door asking if I was okay. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I just cried until my pillow was soaked through. For 3 days, I stayed locked in my room. My friends texted, worried, but I didn't answer. I couldn't face anyone. I felt humiliated, betrayed, destroyed. And yet, in the middle of all that pain, I kept asking myself the same question over and over. Why her? Why not me? I thought Edward loved me. I thought we had something real. Was I not enough? Was I too young? Too naive? On the 4th day, I heard Edward's voice outside my door. Ella, please, he said softly. Let me explain. It's not what you think. But I knew it was exactly what I thought. I had the proof sitting on Mom's phone. I didn't even answer him. I couldn't. Mom tried next. Sweetheart, please talk to me, she said through the door. I never wanted to hurt you. Her voice cracked on the last word. I buried my face in my pillow and sobbed harder. The two people I loved most in the world had chosen each other over me. And I didn't know which betrayal hurt worse. By the end of that week, I wasn't angry anymore. I was numb. Too tired to cry, too broken to yell. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I didn't have the strength. I just stayed quiet, waiting for them to make the next move. But deep down, I knew this couldn't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, I'd have to face them. And when I did, nothing in our lives would ever be the same again. By the end of that awful week, the silence in the house felt like it was strangling me. I hadn't spoken to Mom, I hadn't seen Edward since the night I found those messages. But I knew it was only a matter of time. You can't hide heartbreak forever, not when you live under the same roof as the person who caused it. It was a Saturday evening. I'd been lying on my bed staring at the ceiling, still in the same sweatpants I'd worn for 3 days, when I heard the front door open. Edward's voice drifted up the stairs, casual, like nothing was wrong. My stomach twisted. What was he doing here? I stayed frozen in my room, hoping he'd leave. But then I heard Mom's voice too, low and soft, and something in me snapped. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I went downstairs barefoot, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. They were sitting together on the couch in the living room. Mom looked startled when she saw me. Edward didn't even flinch. He just leaned back, arms crossed, wearing that same calm, infuriating look. Ella, Mom started carefully, like I was a wild animal she didn't want to scare. We were just talking. Why don't you sit down? I didn't sit. I didn't move. How long? My voice was hoarse from days of crying, but I made it steady. How long have you two been sneaking around behind my back? Mom's face went pale. Sweetheart, it's not. Don't call me that. I shouted, louder than I'd ever yelled at her in my life. My hands were trembling, but I clenched them into fists so they wouldn't see. I saw the messages. Mom, I know everything. Edward stood up then, slow and deliberate, like he was in control of the whole situation. Ella, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. Don't you dare talk to me. I snapped, my voice shaking now with rage. You lied to me. Both of you. Mom tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. Please listen to me, she said, her voice cracking. We never meant for this to happen. Edward and I. We just connected. I didn't plan it. I swear. Connected. That word made me feel sick. I laughed bitterly through my tears. You connected. He's my boyfriend, Mom, my first love. Do you even care what this is doing to me? I care about you more than anything, she whispered. But her eyes darted toward Edward, and that told me everything I needed to know. Edward finally spoke again, calm as ever. Ella, I never wanted to hurt you. But your mom and I, we love each other. You're young. You'll understand someday. That was it. That was the moment I lost it. All the numbness, all the exhaustion, all the tears I'd buried for days boiled over into white-hot anger. You love her. I screamed. You used me. You came into my life, told me I was everything you wanted. And now you're saying I'm too young to understand? You're disgusting. Don't talk to him like that. Mom snapped suddenly, surprising even herself with how sharp it came out. I turned to her, my chest heaving. Are you really defending him right now? Your daughter is standing here, heartbroken, betrayed, and you're taking his side. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence was her answer. I felt something break inside me, then not just anger or sadness, but something deeper, like a thread between us that had been cut clean through. I looked at Edward, at the smug set of his jaw, then at Mom, who couldn't even meet my eyes, and I realized there was nothing left to save here. Fine, I said, my voice suddenly cold and calm. Be together. Marry him. Do whatever you want. But don't expect me to stay in this house and watch it happen. Ella, wait, Mom stood up, reaching for me, but I stepped back again. No, I said firmly. I'm done crying over you two. I'm done being the stupid little girl. Who doesn't see what's happening right in front of her? You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I turned and walked up the stairs, ignoring both of them calling my name. My legs were shaking so badly I thought I might fall, but I didn't stop until I was in my room with the door locked. From downstairs I heard their voices low at first, then rising, then falling again. I couldn't make out what they were saying, and I didn't care. Whatever excuses they had for betraying me, I didn't want to hear them. I collapsed on my bed, staring at the ceiling again. But this time there were no tears left. Just an empty, hollow feeling in my chest, like someone had scooped me out and left nothing behind. That night I made myself a promise I would get out. I didn't know how, I didn't know where I'd go. But I couldn't live in that house anymore. Not with them. Not after this. And as much as it hurt to admit, part of me knew they wouldn't stop me. They'd be too busy with each other. My name is Ella, I'm 19 years old. And if you've been following my story so far, you already know my life is nothing like it should be. What no one knows, not my mother, not Edward, not the nosy neighbors who smile to wide, is that I'm planning to leave. Not someday, not when it's safe. Soon, before this house swallows me whole. After that explosive confrontation, things should have cooled down. I thought maybe my mother would finally wake up, see what Edward really is, see what he's been doing to me. Instead, something worse happened. She drifted closer to him. Not physically, but you could feel it. Like two magnets turning until they clicked together. I started noticing how they grew so close to each other. The way she laughed along at his dry jokes. Or how she'd ask him to stay for dinner and fuss over the table like he was royalty. They'd sit on the porch with wine glasses. Her leaning in, sharing a kiss. Him speaking low. I would watch from my bedroom window. Fists clenched so tight my nails left crescent moons in my palms. And then there were the touches. Harmless looking if you didn't know Edward. A hand at the small of her back as they walked inside. His thumb brushing her wrist when he handed her a plate. A gaze that lingered a little too long. And she let it happen. Not only let it, she encouraged it. I wanted to scream. To drag her to the mirror and show her how pathetic she looked, letting a man like him make her giggle like a schoolgirl. But I didn't, I couldn't, because I'd realized something important. The louder I fought, the tighter their bond became. My mother twisted everything. If I raised my voice, I was ungrateful. If I avoided her, I was moody. If I cried, I was manipulative. I soaked it all in. But in all these, Edward was still acting sweet to me like when we were dating, but I didn't give it a second thought, and I think that was my mistake. So I stopped fighting in the open. I smiled when I had to. I let them think they were winning. And meanwhile, I started to plan. First thing I needed, money. I'd been hiding scraps of cash for months. The kind you find at the bottom of a drawer or slipped inside birthday cards. You're not supposed to care about anymore. I sold old clothes online, told Mom I was cleaning out my closet. I even convinced Edward to pay me for helping with errands. He probably thought I'd use it for makeup or junk food. I used every penny to build my escape fund, rolling bills tight and slipping them into the lining of my old backpack. Second thing, a place to go. That was trickier. I couldn't just run to a friend's house, they'd call my mother within the hour. And the police, please. Edward had a way of making himself sound like the victim, and I was terrified no one would believe me. So I started looking for places no one would think to check. Abandoned cabins, hostels in the next town, even a church shelter that didn't ask questions. I memorized bus schedules until I could recite them in my sleep. But the most important part, I had to keep it secret. One slip, one wrong glance, and Edward would know. He always knew too much. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me with that cold, calculating expression like a predator waiting for the right moment to pounce. The closer he and my mother became, the more urgent everything felt. They started taking weekend trips to clear their heads. I'd be left alone in the house with his smell on the furniture. My mother started dressing differently, nicer clothes, brighter lipstick. She hummed while she cooked. She called Edward Ed now, soft and sweet, as if shortening his name made him safe. At night, I lay in bed listening to them downstairs, their voices low and intimate. Every laugh from her, every rumble of his voice felt like a betrayal. And yet, I didn't cry anymore. I didn't scream into my pillow like I used to. I went cold, focused. The night I decided on my exact escape date, it was raining. I sat on the floor of my room with my phone flashlight, going over everything one last time. Bus ticket screenshot saved. Cash counted enough to survive for at least 2 weeks. Backpack packed, clothes, phone charger. Fake ID I'd bought online. Water bottle, protein bars. My old sneakers, quiet on the pavement. I heard them come home late that night, laughing like they'd been drinking. The sound made my stomach twist, but I didn't move. I stayed still, breathing shallow, until their voices faded and the house went quiet. And then I whispered to myself, just to hear it out loud. 3 more days. 3 more days and I'd be gone. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Edward was watching me just as closely, and he was already 2 steps ahead. I was 3 days away from freedom. At least, that's what I thought. The night I chose to leave wasn't stormy or dramatic. No howling wind or flashing lightning, just still, heavy air. The kind that makes you feel like even the trees are listening. Perfect for disappearing. I waited until the house was silent. My mother's laugh had faded hours ago, replaced by soft snores through the wall. Edward wasn't staying over, thank God, but I didn't trust that meant I was safe. Not with him. Not ever. My bag was already packed, hidden under my bed. I timed it all down to the minute, slip out at 2:15 a.m., walk half a mile to the bus stop, catch the 2:40 to Ridgemont, then transfer to the first morning bus out of state. By sunrise, I'd be gone. Everything went smoothly at first. I crept down the hall, holding my shoes in my hand so they wouldn't squeak against the old wooden floorboards. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would wake my mother before I even reached the door. I paused at the top of the stairs, listening, nothing, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I slipped out the back door, easing it shut behind me. The night air hit my face, cool, damp, almost sweet. For the first time in months, I felt something close to hope. I crossed the yard quickly, ducking under the low branches that brushed against my hair. Just a few more steps to the gate. Just a few more and I'd be free. That's when I saw it. A car parked on the gravel drive by the far end of the yard. Headlights off, but engine still warm. I could hear the faint tick-tick-tick of cooling metal. My chest tightened. Edward's car. No, he wasn't supposed to be here tonight. I froze, crouching low in the dark. Maybe he'd just stopped by to drop something off. Maybe he wasn't even inside. But deep down, I knew better. Edward was always 2 steps ahead. I crept toward the gate anyway, forcing my legs to move. If I could just make it to the road, I'd be fine. I reached out for the latch, and it didn't budge. Locked. My mother never locked this gate, ever. Panic clawed at my throat. I fumbled with the latch, yanking harder, but it wouldn't give. Behind me, the faint creak of the back door opening made every muscle in my body seize up. Going somewhere, Ella. His voice, smooth, calm, terrifying. I spun around to see Edward standing on the porch, hands in his pockets like he'd just stepped out for some fresh air. The porch light threw his face into shadow, but I didn't need to see his expression to know he was smiling. I backed away from the gate, searching the yard for another exit. There was none. High fences on either side. Nowhere to run but straight past him. Midnight stroll, he asked, stepping down from the porch. Or were you planning to leave without saying goodbye? Stay away from me, I hissed. My voice shook, but I held his gaze. Ella, he said softly, almost like he pitied me. You don't understand. I'm trying to protect you. The world out there isn't kind. You wouldn't last a week. I'd last longer than I would here. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement, anger, I couldn't tell. He started walking toward me, slow and deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. I bolted. Barefoot, clutching my bag, I sprinted toward the side of the house. I could hear him behind me, not running, just walking fast, like he knew I wouldn't get far. I rounded the corner and nearly collided with my mother. She looked half asleep, hair wild, wearing her robe. "What are you doing out here? Move," I screamed, shoving past her. But Edward's voice followed, calm as ever. "She's just upset. I'll handle it." "Edward, wait," my mother called, but she didn't sound angry, just confused. I reached the front of the house and yanked at the driveway gate. Also locked, of course. I threw my bag over and scrambled up, scraping my hands on the metal bars. Behind me, Edward's footsteps grew louder. "Ella," he said again, and this time his voice was sharper. "Get down." I pulled myself up, heart racing, then a hand clamped around my ankle. I screamed, kicking hard, but his grip was iron. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, yanking me down. I hit the gravel hard, pain shooting up my side. My bag lay just out of reach. "Stop," my mother cried, running toward us. But Edward didn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on me, cold and steady. "You think you can just walk away?" he said, crouching beside me. "Do you have any idea what's waiting for you out there? Do you have any idea what I would do to anyone who tried to take you from me?" Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't answer. I just reached out, grabbed a fistful of gravel, and flung it in his face. He cursed, loosening his grip long enough for me to scramble free. I grabbed my bag and ran barefoot down the road, my mother shouting my name behind me. Edward's furious voice cutting through the night. "Ella, this isn't over." I didn't stop running. Not when my lungs burned, not when my feet bled. Not even when I saw headlights coming down the road, and had to dive into the ditch to hide. I didn't stop until I reached the bus stop, only to see the bus pulling away, taillights disappearing into the darkness. I was too late, alone, stranded, and Edward would be coming.